Amen. Do you like that video earlier? Wow, it's good, isn't it? Just struck by the scale of everything. It's kind of unbelievable. Another thing that makes me go wow is the Lake District, which I realise is a slightly different scale from the universe, but go with it. I just love it there. Even as I just first drive in or am driven in, I look out the window and just go, wow. And I could happily stand there or run there or just walk around at any time and just look. Usually with the rain like battering your face, because that's what happens in the Lake District. That's why there are lakes. But, you know, I just love it. Just noticing the clouds changing or just the scale of the landscape around me, just really aware of my smallness and God's greatness. It just makes me go, wow. Has anyone been to the Grand Canyon? Oh, there we go. Well, you can vouch for this. I haven't been, okay, but I once heard Mike Pilavacci tell a hilarious story about when he went to the Grand Canyon, and he basically tells this story, which is longer and funnier when he tells it, but the gist is he and a friend have traveled for absolutely ages to get there from a very different part of America to get across. And when they finally get there, they're kind of exhausted and sort of regretting ever deciding to travel that far in the first place. And then they get there and realize they're going to have to pay to go and see it. And Mike's walking up thinking, we're going to have to pay to see a hole in the ground. What are we doing? And then he tells us they walk up to the railings. Oh, wow. That's all they can say. Oh, wow. Over and over again. And maybe you can think of a place that does that for you. Maybe somewhere local. It might be the Grand Canyon, or it might be a place in your house or your garden where you just look out and think, wow. Have you ever been on a walk with a toddler? One of the things you very quickly learn if you're on a walk with a toddler is that we are not in a rush. We are not going to be going anywhere fast. And you get loads of this, don't you? Look, look. And you don't really look because, you know, look. And so you sort of glance down and say something generic like, oh, they're lovely. No, look. So you look. It's basically a bit of gravel. And your first reaction is, well, that's rubbish. But have you ever let yourself be drawn in to see it the way they see it? Have you ever actually looked at that piece of gravel and gone, oh my goodness. Gravel can be kind of sharp and smooth at the same time. And it might have a tiny little sparkly bit in it. Wow. When I see someone or hear someone doing something really well, maybe in their sport or in music, whatever it might be, when I get to witness someone doing something at an incredible level beyond perhaps what I thought was possible, that gets me. Wow. A few days before Christmas, you've heard this story, well, not this bit of it, but the ending. I remember being sat at Francesca's house and got a message, and it just said, it was from James, it said, Kerry just called, Daisy May is being discharged. And as you know, we'd prayed for a long time that would happen before Christmas. So that got me. Wow. And maybe now you're thinking of other things that have made you go, wow, perhaps recently, perhaps a long time ago. And it's good to recognize God in that, isn't it? I think those moments can often quite naturally point us to him, God who created the universe and the lakes and the Grand Canyon, and God who created eyes and quarks and fingerprints and gravel and all the other things toddlers get fascinated by. God who uses toddlers to slow us down and help us notice just for a minute. God who blesses us with gifts and talents and creativity, or enables us to appreciate other people's gifts and talents and creativity. God who heals. God who hears the cries of his people and who answers prayer. Wow. And as we recognize God in all those things, it's good to be thankful, isn't it? It's good to give him our praise and our worship. It's good to tell others of how we've seen God's goodness. And I guess this would be kind of a cool place to wrap up this sermon. Just say, there we go. Be encouraged to see God in the good things all around us which is a really good thing. Praise him for his goodness and maybe be challenged to tell others. That'll be a good sermon, I reckon. But I'm going to keep going. Sorry if that's a disappointment to anyone. I want us to think about something else this morning, which I've been thinking about lots. What do we do when we're not in the Lake District or at the Grand Canyon? Maybe when we feel like we can't see any beauty right where we are today. What do we do when we're too busy to appreciate those little things, or when that toddler actually is just screaming and won't do what you've asked it to do 400 times already? What do we do when it feels like we don't have any gifts or talents? Or when maybe injury or illness or finance or other pressures or all kinds of other things are just holding us back at the moment? What do we do when it feels like God doesn't hear or maybe doesn't even care? What do we do if we don't see the healing that we've prayed for? Or when we don't get the answers that we're desperate for? What do we do then when life is hard? And I think that's an important question, because that might be your reality today. And even if it's not, you might know someone who is there today. Or there might be recent times where you have been there. Or perhaps even there are times ahead when things might be tough, things might be hard. Because sometimes life is. Sometimes it feels like things are getting worse instead of better. Sometimes it's hard to see how it will get better. Sometimes it's hard to feel really sure if God is even there. So what do we do then? Now we'll come back to that, but John just read for us Matthew 2 about the Magi going to Bethlehem to see Jesus. And as I was reading it this week, I was really struck by verse 11, which seems to describe the Magi having their very own wow moment, right? On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped. Or to paraphrase, perhaps, on coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and all they could say was, "Oh, wow." And they bowed down and worshipped. But why? That's what I was thinking as I read it. Why did this people that we call wise men, so presumably intelligent grown-ups, why did they bow down and worship when they saw this little boy? Just picture it for a minute. Bowing down is such a symbolic thing, isn't it? It says so much in that simple act. Why did they do it? Did they see this little boy doing great and mighty things right in front of them? Were they impressed by him? Did they wait around for a bit and see if he proved that he could create something or heal someone or do something wonderful? Did they ask him for some stuff first and then see if he gave it to them or did it for them? No, they just bowed down and worshipped him because of who he is. They knew who he was, and that was enough for them. That was their reason for worshipping him right there and right then. Not waiting to see if he'd do impressive things or demonstrate any powers or answer any prayers. Because they knew who he was, they bowed down in worship. So here's a question for you. Do you know who God is? Do you know who he is? Now, the answer to that may be yes. But before any of us just say yes, do you really know who he is? Like, really, really? Have you let it sink in maybe recently? Have you allowed yourself to be just blown away by who he is? The truth of his character, his nature? Have you had a wow moment about who he really is? Trying not to let our human brains restrict that and limit it, but just opening ourselves up to grasp as much as we can of his nature. Because there's something about who God is, and there's something about the name of God, the character of God. And we're going to watch a short video now that will help us see something about the name of God.
There is something about the name of God that changes everything. We call him Father, Savior, Lord, friend. But here is a question for you. Do you know the personal names of God? Names that hold the weight of his character, qualities, significance. Names that resonates with mankind, showing us what he's like and who he is. The ancient world called him Yahweh. For how else can you describe, explain, or introduce the I am? But the world has turned, and in turning now ascribes power to names with no eternal essence. Names that scream for attention, persuasion, acceptance, even worship. But I tell you, now is the time for us, the church, to wake up and also begin to call him Yahweh. For he is Adonai, the Lord, Elyon, the Most High God, Elohim, the God of ancient days. There is something about that name. He is Jireh, our provider, Rapha, our healer, Nisi, our banner, Sekenum, our righteousness, Rohi, our shepherd, Shalom, our peace, Yeshua, our salvation. Oh, there is something about that name. He is the Waymaker, the morning without cloud, the rock that is higher than I, strong deliverer, kinsman redeemer, the first and the last, the beginning and the end, the strength of the children of Israel, the way, the truth, the life, the same yesterday, today, and always, beyond changing, who was, who is, and is to come, the one who stands uncontested forevermore. Oh, there is something about that name, the fullness of God, indeed the great I am. He is almighty, all powerful, all merciful, all gracious, all knowing, all sufficient, all loving. He is all in all, and he is all that you need. There is something about that name, Yahweh.
Wow. Do you know who God is? I wonder if that's the most incredible wow moment you can get. Grasping something of his nature, his character. The Magi must have got something of that in that moment. And this morning, I want to encourage us to seek more of that, to pray for more of that, to open ourselves up to being blown away again about who God really is. And so earlier I said, what do we do when it all feels hard, or when it's going wrong, or when it's hard to see where God is? And I think there are lots of practical things we can do, and those things can be really helpful and enable us to hold on through challenges. We can use wow moments. We can remember the scale of the universe. Last week, Caroline Smith was telling me how she was out walking along the East Lynn River flowing towards Lynmouth, and just how she was struck by the power and force of the water, And it just made her think, gosh, what a creator God who's more powerful than even that. So next time we say, wow, we can take that as a reminder of who God is. And we can look back and remember better times before, perhaps times when we have been more aware of God's presence, where we've seen his goodness and his faithfulness for ourselves. We can remind ourselves of times when we have seen answers to prayer, when we've been convinced of God's goodness and his faithfulness in those things. We can turn to the Bible for wisdom and encouragement. We find the example of Jesus in there, Jesus who reveals to us who God is. We can spend time in prayer. We can spend time with friends and with family who are good for us, who will point us back to Jesus. I think these and lots of other things are really helpful things to do. And as well as those things, here's what I've been thinking this week. Even without any of those things, which are good and helpful to do, even without those things, I think it's good to know we can fundamentally trust God and hold on to hope because of who he is. Hebrews 10:23 says, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And we could repeat that sentence and just replace the word faithful with lots of things, I think. Just like the Magi, I can bow down and worship God, even when I haven't seen him do the healing that I'm praying for. I can hold unswervingly to hope, for the one who promised is the healer. I can bow down and worship God, just like the Magi, even when I can't see how he's making a way in my situation. I can hold unswervingly to hope, for the one who promised is the waymaker. I can bow down and worship God even when I'm struggling with fear and anxiety. I can hold unswervingly on to hope, for the one who promised is the Prince of Peace. I can bow down and worship God whatever life looks like today. I can hold unswervingly to hope, for he who promised is good. He who promised is mighty. He who promised is faithful and loving and trustworthy and kind. He who promised is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The God who loves me enough to send his son to die for me, that's who he is. And the fact that God is God and I am just me, and yet he sees me and knows me and loves me. Wow. Psalm 8 says, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them? God is awesome and mighty and humble and gentle. He holds the stars in his hands and he knows how many hairs on Caitlin's head. And so I'm not saying that we should just keep our heads down and say it's fine when it's not. It's good to call that out. It's good to challenge. It's good to grapple. I know for sure that God can handle our questions and doubts, and it's good to do that out loud for ourselves, with God and with other people. It's good to question what our faith means when it is hard. You know, I can think of situations, people that I'm praying for, things where my heart is broken because I'm not seeing what I really want God to do, what I'm really praying for. But as a foundation, I'm choosing to believe that God is God. And I'm choosing to worship him because of who he is. And there's lots that I don't understand and lots that I don't like. But because of who he is, I'm choosing to hold on to hope and trust him for the rest. And I actually don't need to understand it all. because he is God and I am not. And in that is precisely where we find that hope, I believe. Hope that makes it possible to keep going. Hope that makes it possible to hold on, that doesn't depend on my circumstances. Hope that assures me that God has the final victory. So let's hold unswervingly to hope. For he who promised is faithful. I'm going to pray. Lord, I pray that you would come this morning by your Spirit and show us who you are. Reveal afresh to us part of your character, your nature. Show us what we need to see this morning, I pray. And Lord, whatever situations we might be in this morning, I thank you that you are God and we are not. And as we look for you, would you help us to respond as the Magi did? Would you help us to say, wow, and bow down and worship you, not waiting for you to change our circumstances first, but help us to hold on to hope because you are God, you are faithful. Lord, would you give us whatever we need today, this week, to hold on to hope, I pray. Amen.